I don't really know if this is a good fit for me.
Our industry could do a better job.
They have a big group of you and they just throw you in there, and that's where it gets a little interesting.
Welcome to Tailored Wealth. I'm your host, Taylor Mavrakos. In my 10 years as a financial advisor, I've noticed that when it comes to financial education, women are considered an afterthought. My intention with this podcast is to create a space where we talk about financial education tailored to women as we navigate choices throughout our lives. And I have a very special woman with me today, Haley Brown. Hi, Haley.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so happy to have you on. So do you want to intro you or do you want me to intro you?
What's your intro for me?
Oh, good question. So Haley Brown, officially she's my intern, but she has become so much more than that. So Haley is a senior at University of Tampa, but when we met, you were a junior.
Yes.
And my sister actually teaches as an adjunct at University of Tampa. And she was like, you have to meet this former student of mine. She's so great. She wants to be an intern. And I was like, okay. So then we met up and we did our interview. And maybe you could talk a little bit. What's your version of our interview?
So I would say our interview was the most laid back interview I've ever been a part of, but it was great. Like, we just hit it off right off the bat. And honestly, I was telling my mom, I'm like, I'm so nervous. And she's like, you'll do great. Obviously, like, I've been through interviews before, but it was nothing. We just started, you asked one question and then it just started flowing after that. So it just went well.
Yep.
So, yeah.
I heard your Midwestern accent and I was like, I love working with people from the Midwest because y'all are the nicest.
Yes.
So that made it really easy.
Yeah, we have that Midwest charm. What can I say?
That Midwest charm, yes. And so then also, I mean, you had, persistently been emailing my sister in a good way, just being like, hey, I really want to get into the industry and all these other things. Talk a little bit about that process for people that are in college and maybe looking to get into finance. I assume you were probably doing that with other financial firms. I won't get my feelings hurt, but walk me through how you broke into the industry.
So I would say I started off on LinkedIn, and I just started there and connecting with people and building my LinkedIn profile, I guess. That was the way I began. And then obviously I talked to Jordan and knew about her and your guys' background because she was my professor. And I was like, this is very interesting to me. But also I started Tampa as an allied health major. So going into finance was a very different realm for me, and I didn't know where to start. So I, like I said, started LinkedIn profile, and I had to do that for class. So it just kind of killed two birds with one stone and started messaging people, and that's where I started.
And what would you say in the emails? Because I never read them. I just knew that you were a great student and that you were emailing. So what did you say?
So with Jordan, I asked her if there was any position to shadow or internship, do an internship position at the company. I knew you guys were a smaller company, so I didn't know what you guys necessarily wanted to or had to offer in that sense. So I reached out that way and just said that I was very interested in what you guys did and your values. I read your website and all things like that. And really with Jordan, again, I just emphasized I liked her teaching habits. I liked the way that she carried herself. So I knew that would also follow into your guys' company. So I knew that she would be a great teacher. So if one of you guys were too, I just thought it would work out well.
And who is the better teacher, would you say? No, I'm just kidding.
You guys have your different teaching styles.
That's a good answer. We have different interviewing styles too. Because my sister, is a professor. So she's much more formulaic with what she does and more thought out with it. And I just want to sit down and have a conversation because I'm like, welcome to the Wild West. I had to do my
interview with Jordan in class.
Did you really?
Yes, we had an interview.
Was it the same as the one with me or a little bit? No. I think I followed the first question.
Yes, the first question, yeah.
And then it just
You said, tell me about yourself.
And off we went. Off we went. Well, I admire people who are persistent. And I think to circle back to something you were saying, about our firm and about kind of financial advising offices, I feel like our industry could do a better job of communicating that we exist as an industry. Because I think for a lot of people coming out of school, at least this was my experience 10 years ago, if it was finance, it was we'll go into investment banking or nothing, right? And so wealth management, a lot of those offices are smaller. And so they are harder to kind of find and break into. but they can be really neat careers, a little bit more holistic. You just learn a bit more in all the different areas. But could you talk a little bit about your experience of what do they tell you from a career perspective coming out of finance that you should be looking for versus what you found?
So I would say a lot of people go into, like you said, investment banking, private equity, things like that, the big corporate companies. While that is great, and there's a lot of advantages to that, I've also heard disadvantages, especially in the internship level aspect, because you're kind of just grouped as one. They have a big group of you and they just throw you in there and say, this is what we need done, which is great, but it's not like tailored to what you want to learn, I guess. It's kind of just like they fit you in where they need help and try to get you those basics. But sometimes people will come back and be like, oh, I didn't really learn as much as I thought I was going to learn, things like that. And they'll be like, I don't really know if this is a good fit for me. But I definitely think that those were the big two that people go into. And again, the big corporate jobs. So you're just one of many.
And I think it's worth noting for kind of smaller firms. So for example, our firm wouldn't post on Indeed usually, right? Or something like that. So an adjunct professor, for people that don't know, typically those are going to be the professors that are going to have other jobs. So they're going to have more of that kind of real world experience versus being like a full-time professor. So were you strategic about kind of networking more with those professors?
Yeah, I will say definitely those are the professors that I gravitated towards and just like felt like I learned the most from. So I felt like I could ask those deeper questions and those real life world examples. So it definitely helped me more as a student, but also again, find career, because if Jordan never talked about her work or her background, I wouldn't have been, because she's a marketing professor. So I would have never have gotten where I was if she didn't explain that to us and talk about her real life examples. So I definitely think that adjunct professors, it does help in the long term.
And to circle back, you mentioned you started in allied health.
Oh, yes.
What is that? And then how did you end up in finance?
So basically, allied health is the broad degree for just health sciences. So if you want to do anything that continuous education, so going to grad school, you typically do an allied health major, at least at the University of Tampa. So I was going as allied health with a medical concentration because I wanted to be a physician assistant. So then I would do the PA track after post my bachelor degree. So Tampa had a PA program, so I was just gonna go and do all 5.5, 6 years there. So
oh wow, okay.
That was the plan, obviously, if I got in and everything. But that was the plan, and honestly, that was the plan I had since high school, since probably sophomore year when I took my anatomy class. So,
and when did you switch?
Well, that's where it gets a little interesting. I switched after my first semester.
Okay.
And I know, weed out classes.
So did I.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. You're good.
But I was interested in the information and what I was learning, but I wasn't loving what I was doing, if that makes sense. So I just knew that for me, it didn't make sense to get in all that debt and be in continuous education and be in school for that many years and just postpone this beginning of my career to do that when I wasn't loving what I was learning. So that's when I fell into business. And with business at the University of Tampa, they have different categories that you have to pick. So finance, accounting, management, marketing, entrepreneurship. So I decided I was in between finance and accounting.
Okay.
And then I picked finance because I was like, when I hear accounting, I just think accountant. Didn't want to be an accountant. So I was like, I'll do finance. And then when I picked it, I didn't really know what finance really, I just knew numbers, but I didn't know what it exactly was. But later I figured that out.
Well, and I think it's important to know too, like it's a field where you can make good money coming out of school. And that's a huge thing.
That was also one of my fears with allied health is once you get your job, you cap off at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not really that room for growth. So if you get in all this debt, which it works for a lot of people and some people don't get, but I knew I was going to get in some sort of debt. So I was like, it isn't quite for me. But finance, and also that was a worry of mine, was that it's just so broad. There's so many options. Like we talked about investment banking, private equity, hedge funds, wealth management. There's so many different things that you could get yourself into that it's intimidating at first.
That's fair.
Yes.
That's very fair. And I think too, at least back in the day when I can remember it, and I've had friends, in their 20s where they've made that choice. Am I going to take on more debt or not? And what's going to be my return on that investment later on? How long is it going to take me to pay off that debt? What's that going to look like? And I think it's interesting because really you make that first decision when you're 17, 18.
Right.
And I haven't been 17, 18 in a minute. You're closer to that, much closer to that than I am. So I'm curious if you could kind of talk a little bit about being 17 and trying to figure out, we mentioned you're from the Midwest and UT's a private school far from where you're from, right? So how did you and your family kind of go through that big financial decision-making process?
For me personally, I took control of all my applications and where I was applying to. My mom didn't really have a preference of where I went. It was kind of just up to me and I would figure it out. However, with that, it was on me financially, and my mom pays as much as she can, but it's my education, it's on me. That was basically kind of her thing. So I applied to all Midwest schools besides Tampa. And I did have good grades, so I got scholarships and stuff, but I was ultimately between Mizzou and Tampa. And both of them had a good scholarship, but Tampa was a little bit more expensive. And ultimately, my mom said, pick where you're going to be happy at. Don't pick it based off the money. If you get, we'll figure it out. It is what it is. So I knew I was going to be in a little bit of debt, but it was a key factor in my decision-making process. It's a lot. It's expensive. And honestly, it just keeps getting more and more expensive. We just talked about it, how they raise tuition every year. So
they do. Yeah.
And you don't expect it. You don't know it's coming until they send it out and you're already there. So you either pay it or you transfer.
Well, and right now, statistically, I was looking it up, there's $1.74 trillion of student loan debt in America. Crazy.
Too much.
Crazy. And the average student loan debt is $37,853 per student. So that's pretty wild if you take a look at it. I also want to brag on you because when you were going through school, you were also working the whole time, pretty much.
Yes.
And I was in a similar situation when I was in school, just because I remember I had always worked as a lifeguard in high school, like a lot of people in Florida do, right? And so, because I'm from here.
The warm weather all year round.
The warm weather. And then it worked out because I went to college in North Carolina, so I could still be a lifeguard. Well, then I find out from all my friends that stay in Florida, it's the toughest job to get if you go to a Florida school. Because everybody from Florida, if you go to a state Florida school, everybody was a lifeguard in high school. So they had to do all these crazy swims. They had to pick a brick up off the bottom of the deep end and swim to the top. They're like, you're a lifeguard in college? Wow, you must be an amazing swimmer. I'm like, nope, I just went out of state and then I got to be a lifeguard and study for half my shift and lifeguard for the other half.
Yeah, I tried being a lifeguard at Tampa and that was the first job to go.
Crazy.
You couldn't get a job as a lifeguard.
Now you know why.
No.
It's because of all those Floridians snagging your job. I know. But when I remember when my parents were even sitting down to talk to me about school, it's just a foreign concept, that much money. When you've been making back then it was $10 an hour as a lifeguard. I'm like, it's going to be how much money for me to go do all these things?
And you don't really process it all at that. You're like, that's 4 years from now that I have to worry about it. But no, you have to worry about it now, because if you pick a school that's going to get you in $100,000 worth of debt, that's a now and later problem that you have to figure out.
So when you were looking at internships to take on, what advice would you give people that are looking to maybe break into an industry in terms of, should you just go for the experience or should you really prioritize a paid internship?
I think it depends on your financial capability, where you are at financially, and if you can be okay without getting paid. So for me, I knew I needed the extra income during school. So if I had to have an internship that wasn't paid, and I say I couldn't find anything else, then I have to do what I have to do. But ultimately, I kind of needed that extra income, so I needed a paid internship if I could. Because I have some friends that are like, I just need anything. whatever I can put on my resume, anything that will give me experience, that will be enough. I think it just depends on where you are financially and what works with you and your family.
That makes a lot of sense. And I also think, again, it depends on what industry you're getting an internship in. So especially for the women listening, a lot of times we struggle a little bit more with negotiating our value and negotiating what we're worth. I'm telling everybody who's listening, if you are getting an internship in any kind of financial field, you should be getting paid. It's great to get the experience. Now, if you're interning at a nonprofit, maybe then you're not getting paid.
Yeah.
But don't make the mistake of not asking at least.
Advocate for yourself.
Love that. Advocate for yourself. Because I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think you asked me if it was paid back when we first started talking in the interview.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we set hours and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I thought it was great because I'm like, of course you should get paid. You know, especially I feel like when you're a junior or a senior in college.
Yeah, I feel like it's a lot of times people get nervous about the fact, and it is kind of an awkward conversation to have with like a boss about like, oh, how much am I getting paid? This, that, and the other. But ultimately, everyone has to ask the same questions. Everyone has been in that position in their life to be an interviewee and then be an interviewer. So it just kind of, you have to ask those questions, and it is what it is. But it is a little nerve-wracking.
It is. So, okay, I want to ask you about a lot of different things we were touching on. I think the first thing I want to ask is, you had mentioned that finance can be overwhelming.
Yes.
And you are super smart. And I think that it's overwhelming for everybody, right? And I always say for people that are coming out of school, if you don't know what you want to do, especially as a woman, go into finance because number one, pays really well. And number two, the skills that you learn can translate for the rest of your life. So being able to pick out your 401k investments and having kind of general financial knowledge. So can you talk a little bit about kind of just like the basics that you've learned just because you chose to pursue finance?
I will say going into finance, I didn't know much. I never grew up as a family that we had investments or like we had those investment accounts or talked to a financial advisor or anything like that. That was never really, obviously my mom always had us save, and from our Christmas money, birthday money, our paychecks, always had to put either half or more in our savings account. That was always a big rule. But other than that, we never got taught how to invest or talking about retirement, because obviously we're still young, but it is something that needs to be talked about. So I feel like those are the biggest takeaways I've definitely learned being in finance, is the retirement and all the different things that come with it. And then obviously tax implications with that, saving and investment choice options and stuff like that. So I feel like that has definitely really, even if I weren't to be going in finance professionally, it is something that everyone should know. I even tell my mom, who's 43, I'm like, you really should invest. You really should invest. And she's like, but I don't know where to begin. And she's 43. And she's like, I don't know where to begin. And that's a lot of problem that, like, we see that all the time with people, that they just don't know where to start. I think learning it young is definitely very beneficial, because then you can also teach other people. The longer that you do it, then you can teach other people, and it just keeps trickling down. So then, like, I started it, so then hopefully I'll start it with my kids young, and then it will go down generations. So
I love that.
Yeah.
And what advice do you give your mom when she doesn't know where to start?
Well, I try to explain it, but also I'm not a professional quite yet. So I explain what I know, and then I'm like, you should talk to Taylor.
There you go.
But
that's important.
But you also have credibility. There's proof that what you do, it works. So yes, I tell her, and I'm like, this is what we like. I try to tell her like things that like I would do, but also I don't have that much credibility as you know what I'm saying?
But you know a lot.
I do. Yeah. But I'm like, you should really talk to Taylor.
And I think that's important, is even just knowing who to seek out, right? Because I think a lot of people don't even have that access. You were mentioning earlier that you didn't grow up with a financial advisor, and how to kind of get those access points, because everybody doesn't have, I say this all the time, everybody does not have to be a financial expert. You just have to know how to seek one out and the right questions to ask.
Right. It's like a carpenter. If you need a carpenter, you wouldn't come to me if you wanted a carpenter, but
right.
You find a good one. You find someone you trust. You find someone that you know does a good job, and then you pursue them. And it's the same thing with financial advisor. So that's why I told her to go to you.
There you go. Good advice. And I think too, building on that, let's say then you become the financial advisor. Well, then bad news, you're not an estate planning attorney, right?
Yes.
Or you're not a realtor, or
Right.
you're not a mortgage expert. So talk to me a little bit about kind of the people that you've met throughout the process that kind of are not in finance, but maybe you've learned from, or how to build out that team as you get older and start to build out your life.
Being here and being at MFP, I've realized that there's a lot more counterparts than just the financial advisor. It comes with the wealth management territory, comes with a lot of other people that I never quite expected. Like you said, the estate planning attorney, and then you have like mortgage experts, you have bank experts, you have real estate people, and there's so many different people that play into the equation of your client who is seeking financial help. It's like you're baking a cake. There's all these different ingredients to get to the final product, which is the cake, and it's cool to see all their different views and how it all goes into one thing.
I never thought about it that way. It is like baking a cake.
Yeah.
That is true. That's great. I love that. I'm going to start using that. And I think too, it's important when we talk about having access to like a financial advisor. A good entry point and knowing the right questions to ask, a big one is like, who is your team?
Yeah.
Because if you meet a financial advisor that's like, I'm a jack of all trades and I do everything, because we all can't do everything.
There's too much to do if you did
There's
everything.
too much to do. And there's so many subtleties, I think. And something that is unique, I think, about working at a smaller firm, right, that's got less employees, is that all of a sudden you have a lot more access to clients than a lot of your peers might. Because I believe a lot of financial advising is so custom, it's so tailored, if you will. So it's I know, exactly. So talk a little bit about the difference between you and I, because you and I, for the first like 6 months, not in an impersonal way, but I considered hiring you to be an investment, right? An investment in our company. And what did that look like? And it looked like, well, hopefully you were staying on for at least the rest of your tenure at UT, which, yeah, you have been, which is wonderful. Every summer I just like to make up new titles. I'm like, you're a junior associate intern. And then I'm like, you're a junior analyst intern. I'm like, you're a please never leave intern. But when we were talking about, in the beginning, I feel like it was a lot more of you and I sitting down, almost more like a class where like I was teaching you kind of fundamentals of what went on. And the second portion of it was kind of, once you had those building blocks, really sitting down and seeing with different clients how that works, right? There's the tenets and then there's applying them. And a lot of times every client's different, right?
Every client is very different.
Every client is different. So two-part question. The first is, talk about kind of those building blocks that you learned experientially through working with me and our firm versus what you learned in your classroom.
So there is a very big difference between what I've learned in my internship and then in the classroom. The classroom, again, is more by the book. So it's learning things as a whole, as a very generic whole. And then with what I've learned at MFP is very, like you said, customized. So it's how to tailor your approach to each individual client, as the classroom is just how they would handle everybody. And it's just very broad and not specific at all. So I definitely have learned a lot more from the internship. And like I tell you all the time, if I could spend all 5 of my days at MFP, I would, but I can't.
We would too.
Yes. Yes, I'm grateful that I am able to get my education. I'm able to go to school, but ultimately at this point where I am, I'm a second semester senior now. I'm just ready to like be done with the school aspect, because yes, like it's given me some of those building blocks, but MFP, like my internship, has given me so much more that is able to build into my career, because like I said, finance is so broad. It's so wide range, and that's basically what our classes are. It's supposed to treat everything as a whole, and it's not. That's not what the profession is. It's not everything as a whole. There's so many different things, so it's hard to just group that all in as one.
I think building off of that, a lot of those broad things that you learn, they're different based on who your end client is, right? So if you're in an investment bank, your end client is very different than if you're at our wealth management office. So without going into specifics on any clients, because we would never do that, talk a little bit about maybe what surprised you about sitting down where all of a sudden it's just me, you, and the client in a conference room. What was surprising about that environment?
The most surprising thing to me was how comfortable the clients feel when they talk to you. So like you always say all the time that your job is basically like a therapist mixed with a therapist and a personal trainer who had a kid that's very good at math.
That's exactly
I'm
it.
just trying to get it.
That's exactly it. Yes.
And it's honestly so true. And it's like a doctor.
Mhm.
When you go to treat someone, you need to know all of their background. And so same thing, finances are a big part in people's life. Their money is their biggest asset. They need to know, like, you need to know all the aspects that are going on in their life. So, because I would have never guessed that as a financial advisor, you'd hear quite literally everything.
Quite literally everything. And it's kind of your job to kind of bring it back into the money piece of it.
Yes.
Because I remember when I first started, I was like, I have all of the building blocks, all of the general. Like I knew the rates of return. I knew every single investment. And I would like prep for meetings. Like I would prep for so long for meetings. I still do, but very differently. And I remember I would sit down with the clients. And I warned you about this before we sat down with them. I sat down and I was ready to talk about like mutual funds and like rates of return and standard deviation. And they were like, yeah, so like I really want a boat and my wife doesn't want a boat. And I would like to talk to you for 2 hours
They're
about
like,
that.
psych, I don't want to hear about the mutual fund.
They're like, I don't want to hear about that at all. I'm like, oh, okay. And I'd be like basically throwing the statement at them to take home. I'm like, please look at this. And they would go, no, we trust you. We're good.
You're like, this is for you. Please
Right.
take it.
Yeah, exactly. How many times do clients leave the folder in the room?
So many.
We have to like chase
You're
them
like,
out to the
"Here,
parking
here,
lot.
Don't forget. Please
They're
look
like,
at
oh,
it.
I made money. That's good. I'm like, well, yeah, so that's why we're here. Yep.
It's usually the last, like, I was going to say 5 minutes, but that's being generous. Last 3 minutes of the appointment, it's,
Yeah.
oh, you made this much. And, you know, and then you talk about it for like 2 minutes and they're like, okay, but I trust you and it's good. But
That's
the
good.
majority of the time, it's them talking about their life, which we always want to hear. We always are curious, interested, want to know if they're doing good. And then we tie it back into the money and it all works out. But it is very surprising.
It is surprising. I always say, like you were saying, I say that I'm a personal trainer and a therapist who had a kid that's good at math.
Yes.
You nailed it. And the reason why is because the personal training piece is that it's a discipline. So you can't just be good with money one day. You have to be good at money every day and figuring out every time you make a financial choice, is it to your best interest? And then the therapist is exactly what you were talking about, which is the more you tell me, the more I can help you.
Right.
I always equate it to building a house where it's like, you know how many bedrooms and bathrooms you want, you know if you want a 1-story or a 2-story, but you don't sit down with the engineer and the architect and help them with the math to make sure the walls don't fall in, right? And that's what I tell clients is really just the more you share with me, the more I can help you. But I can't figure out how to build it out if you don't tell me exactly what you want,
Right.
you know? So I appreciate you saying that because that's something that we work really hard on. And I heard this at the very beginning of my career. They were like the best financial advisors just work with a scrap piece of paper when they sit down with a client and they draw out the whole plan for them. All the Excel stuff and the software is fancy. It's nice. It's pretty to look at.
Makes it look pretty, yeah.
Makes it look pretty, yeah. But it's like you really have to know. And there's so many different things. Even like I remember when we first started having you come in meetings, I was so excited because I was confident there were things that I forgot to tell you when we were doing our little like classroom days that just come out of the woodwork based on all the stuff that people want. I remember after COVID, everybody in Florida wanted an RV. And we talked about cash flow and taxes a lot with the RVs. You know, there's been different things over the years. This year, the election was a hot topic that everybody wanted to talk about. But it's been a wild ride. And then we had the hurricanes here. And it changes all the time, as you've seen in the past, what is it, year that you've worked here? Yeah.
Almost, yeah.
Almost a year. Yeah. So yeah, there's just a lot of changes that go on.
Like I said, it's just very personalized to each individual client, but also what's going on. Like you said, the election, the hurricane, what's going on, and it changes all the time. So there's no textbook to read to get you there. So that's why it goes back to the question of, difference between classroom and internship is you need to have that in-person live experience, hands-on experience to be able to become a financial advisor.
I want to ask you a question I'm curious about. So in another episode, we talked about women as investors, and women typically are not as apt to get into investing, get into finance. But when they do, they actually outperform men by 0.4%, according to a study. Why are you not surprised?
I feel like women, sometimes it takes them a little longer to get into something, but when they do, they're very persistent, and when they put their mind to something, they go all the way. They go 100%. Men, they're just so quick to just like do something. Like they would just want to try everything, which is a great thing, but it also has its cons also. So I feel like women are also very detail oriented and find those little like niche areas that to focus on more than men do. Men just do everything, which again has its pros, but its cons. So I feel I'm not surprised that women are slower to get into investing, but when they do well.
And I think there are statistics too behind just the confidence piece of it, right? And that worthiness piece of it. I don't know the exact numbers, but typically women, if they want to apply for a job, they think they need to meet all the qualifications to apply. And men feel that they need significantly less. Like, well, I've got some of them, good enough, I'll apply for it, right? But I'm curious because one of the reasons that women outperform, according to the study, was they do more of what's called buy and hold strategy. And at our office, we talk a lot about investing for the long term.
Yes.
And I'm curious, now that you've worked at a financial firm for a year, if you were to have something like a 2008, a big stock market dip, do you think that you would be able to weather that better because of all the experiences that you've had so far?
I think so. I think just learning more about the stock market in general and just learning that it's not a race. It's you want to hold it out for the end game, and ultimately the longer, they always say invest early. And they say that because compounding and also just it helps you. If you just look at a 1 week period, you're going to see a lot of changes in the market. But if you look at it over a whole year, you won't see, you could, but you might not see those dramatic changes as much. It's going to look like little divots, like little waves. But in a 1 week period, it's going to look like a big wave. Right. So I feel like you should, it would make my experiences would help me weather the storm even more. Just knowing that information and just really studying more about the stock market, I guess.
I'm going to put you on the spot for a second.
Okay.
I want to hear your description of what compound interest is.
I would say compound interest is, instead of just making 1% year after year after year, it gets added to what you make in the next year and then the next year. So 1 year you make 1%, the next year you make 1.5. So if you think about it, your whole total value is more from what you made. So if you have a bigger total and then a bigger compound or in rate, it's just going to keep going and going, and you're going to get a larger number than just keeping the same percentage. You're still going to increase, just not by that much. And if you have more years under your belt, that gives you more time for your account to grow and again compound and become bigger as a whole.
That makes sense. That was good.
That was like the easy way to describe it.
No, it's good.
Elementary school.
Did I ever tell you my guppy math thing? Did we talk about this?
I don't think so.
Poor Haley. She just listens to all my crazy metaphors all the time. That's
honestly,
why she's like,
they help sometimes because I feel like sometimes it's just easier to break it down and say it like as if you're talking to a middle schooler, like something that they would understand.
100%. And by the way, I feel that way about like medicine. I don't understand health. I'm like, I need to, just because I know a lot about one subject doesn't mean I know it about other ones.
Yes.
But so my guppy math thing. So once upon a time, I was going to a carnival with my grandparents. And my grandparents always wanted to be like the favorites. And so they were like, we're taking the girls, my sister and I, to a carnival, and we're going to get them fish. And my parents were like, no, you're not. We have 2 dogs. And they said, well, the fish are going to stay at our house. So we got these guppy fish and we put them in a little bowl at my grandparents' house. We didn't know that it was a male and a female guppy fish that loved each other. And all of a sudden, they had like 4 more guppy fish.
No way.
And then all of a sudden, all of those guppy fish had more guppy fish. And literally, Haley, we could not see like past, it was just a big glass of guppy fish. It was insane.
They were compounding.
They were compounding. Yes, they were. So it's not just that it's the 2 guppy fish that made all those other guppy fish. It's that those 2 made 4 more and then they made more. And that's what the compounding is, right? Same thing, same example I give where if it's a family and the grandparents, they have, let's say 2 kids, but then each of those kids has 2 more kids.
Right.
All of a sudden you end up with this big family, but you didn't have to get pregnant that many times. How nice is that? Because it's compound interest. And I do think, and that's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about doing this podcast. And I tell you this all the time is that it's not that complicated, a lot of this stuff. And they make it complicated. And I don't know why exactly. I have a few ideas, but they make it more complicated than it needs to be. Because at the end of the day, if everybody understood this, especially when they were your age, you can be in such a better position over the long term. Because with that compound interest, you just need more time, right? Yep. If you say, I'm going to build out a 12-person family when you're age 65, when the other person has grandkids, like, ain't going to happen. It's not going to be a big family, right? And same idea. If you can start when you're young, you can build it out and you can build out that interest over time. And what do I always say in the conference room? The one thing we're always trying to outrun is time.
Well, and that's one of the questions I had on my investments final. It was, how do you become a millionaire early? Or how can you become a millionaire? And it's invest and start early. Start when you're young. Those were the 2 that he said. And I was like, okay, whatever he said. And
just for the record, Haley gets 100% on all of her investment exams. And I take it as a personal pride. I feel like we're both getting 100%. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I always tell Taylor, I run back and I'm like, guess what I got?
Which, okay, I want to get to this too, because this was a very proud moment for me as, what would you call me? Your mentor, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I can be your mentor. Good. So I'm asking you like sheepishly, I'm like, can I be your mentor? I hope so. Another thing that is just a personal gripe of mine is that I don't feel like colleges really equip people very well for like the practical application piece of especially finance, but just going out and getting a job. I can't speak to other fields. I don't know how that works. But what I do know is that I wish somebody would have said to me, especially when I was still in school mode, in study mode, hey, finance, good news. We don't have to go to grad school. We just have to take a couple of tests that aren't that expensive to take. And if I could have knocked those out my senior year, it would have made me more marketable, better negotiating for my first job, and would have given me those practical tools that my Econ 101 didn't necessarily give me. When you started the internship, kind of in line with my Wild West way of interviewing, I was like, we're also going to have a Wild West way of how you're going to break into finance, which is that in addition to your classes, if you want to take the first finance exam, we'll start there and we'll keep going. But I want you to kind of walk through what that process is.
So the first exam is the SIE exam, which is the first portion of the Series 7, I guess now. They split it into 2. Basically, we talked about it and we made like kind of a game plan of how I was gonna tackle it, but with your help, obviously.
You did all of that.
So we decided for me to do it over the summer because I was interning over the summer. And honestly, the process is very straightforward. I got the books. Not that I overstudied, but I think I made myself a lot more nervous than I needed to be just because it was my first exam in the industry. I didn't know really what to expect what to expect. I've taken my SAT, my ACT, things like that, but it's not the same. That's your general education, it's different. So I didn't know what to expect. So I studied for probably 2 months, but like on and off because I was working also. And so it was on and off. And then
how many books was it that you had to study?
It was 1 book and then the manual, which the manual had like practice questions. And then there's like the online portion that has practice questions. And then definitely the Q bank, like the question bank was that's Jordan. Jordan was like, just keep practicing the Q bank questions, just keep making practice exams and just keep doing that because the more you know, off those are real application questions, real life questions that they could possibly ask you because they pull from that. So I did a lot of practice tests, and I read the whole book, which was time consuming, but I definitely think like I'm glad I started off that way because yes, you forget something or you like look past some things, but then you'll go back to you'll take the practice exam and you'll be like, oh, okay, I remember seeing something like that. And then it jogs your memory and you just keep pushing through and then keep taking the practice exams. But if I had never read the information before, it would have been I don't think I would have fully grasped the concept. So I think reading it through first helped a lot.
And how was taking the exam?
It was good. It was definitely I was not expecting it to be so serious.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I get there and they had I couldn't wear like a sweatshirt or like obviously couldn't wear an Apple Watch or have your phone on you. You put that in a locker. Had to take out all my earrings, my necklace, my bracelets, rings, like any jewelry you had to take off. They put you through like a metal detector. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I was like, this is crazy, but it was good. They fingerprint you, everything like that. But take your picture, take your photograph.
I always look really great in those. I always have like no makeup on.
It was
my hair's
like
in a
8
messy
a.m.
bun.
I was like, this is great. Thanks guys so
100%.
much. But no, it was actually really good. And like I said, little more security than I thought. But again, it is a industry exam, so you have to. But yeah, it went well. They tell you if you pass or fail right at the end. So
that's nice.
So I knew as it was loading, it was taking forever, of course. And I'm like, please.
The spinner of death.
Yeah,
I hate
so
that
it's
thing.
like, and then it says pass or fail. No percentage, but honestly, that's better. I don't need to know.
I'm sure you got 100. It's fine. What was the hardest part about the material?
Options.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
Asked you a lot of questions about options. Yeah, that was, but also we don't, I've never had hands-on experience with really options because we don't we don't do that. So I've never really seen it in the forefront, I guess. So reading about it was kind of hard. And again, in classes, up until this semester, I hadn't learned about options. I learned it in my investments class, but I took the SIE exam over this past summer, so I hadn't learned about options. So that was really the first I was reading about it, ever really studying that material, even looking at it. So that was definitely the hardest part.
And if you don't know what those are, watch The Big Short. We will not cover it here right now. But where I wanted to get with that is taking that exam. Would you say that for people that think, oh, I can't take a finance exam, I'm not smart enough to, would you say that anybody who's taking kind of college level courses, if they're able to pass those, it's comparable or similar?
Yeah, I definitely think that you can pass it. You definitely can.
Okay, good.
Would say maybe study a little bit, but I do know some people who studied for 2 weeks and they were fine. I just was very nervous, and I'm not the best at standardized testing. I'm good if I study, but I'm not one of those people that could be oh, I'm going to study for 5 days and then let's just go take the exam. Because I'll
fair.
just psych myself out. So
I'm the same way.
I need to know that I'm confident before I go into it. Otherwise, I don't know. So I think anyone could take it. Anyone who takes college courses in finance and they could definitely do it.
I love it.
Yeah.
So in terms of now that you have all this financial knowledge, talk to me about the TikTok, the reels, all the investment experts, air quotes, that are on the internet. What are you seeing and how do you feel about it?
I see a lot of people talk about, especially college guys, they like to talk about this quite often, getting into Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, things like that, and how one day it's gonna go up. It's gonna skyrocket.
They're gonna money. It's not real.
Yeah, they're gonna become rich. That it's gonna go off one day. And I don't know, maybe one day, but
not where you would invest your money.
I don't know if I gamble like that. I don't know if I'd want to take that gamble. That's just me. I personally don't like to gamble, but some people, everyone has their thing. But again, it is your money you're dealing with and your life's work. You've worked really hard for it. So personally, I would want it to be somewhere that I know is growing, but safely. There's a little risk. Obviously, anything you do with the stock market, there's always a risk with it. But at least you can try to minimize that risk instead of going into something that's very risky.
That's very fair. Calculated risk.
Yes.
We talk a lot about that.
Yes.
Okay. Got it. Would you mind sharing the story that you told me? This was life-changing for me. One day you came in the office and you were like, we can cut this out if you don't want me to talk about it. But it was a big deal for me and got my wheels spinning. And I tell you all the time, and I tell the women that we work with, like, I am unapologetically promoting women in finance. And I always say, men didn't give an excuse for why they did it. I don't know why I need to give an excuse for why I'm doing it, and I'm not giving one.
Right.
Because only about 31% of all financial advisors are women. I believe that reflects down into kind of representation for women becoming clients. Because if you don't see anybody that looks like you that's advising you, it becomes less accessible to you, right? So a game changer for me was after you passed your SIE exam, because again, it was kind of just my first foray into having like a protege where we're trying to get you into the industry. And I remember you said, I went back to my class, and you're always so kind and humble. And you said, there's this guy in class, and he's like the guy that everybody has decided is like the finance bro. And he, you know, says fancy things like private equity all the time. And so he was talking about something in the middle of your class about how he was going to go into private equity. And one of your friends said, well, Haley just passed her SIE exam. And he kind of just paused.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he's like, that's impossible. And you're like, no, I took it and I passed it. And all of a sudden, even though you weren't sitting there bragging, saying like, I'm the finance girl, like,
but they then take you more seriously. They might have looked at me as just like another person trying to pursue finance before, but then he was like, oh, I haven't even taken my SIE exam, and I'm this finance guru at the age of 21. So he did take me a lot more seriously. And then I got my hundreds on my investments exam.
I love it.
So I was like, okay. But
I felt like a proud mom. I was like, wow, that's so cool.
Well, because like, I feel like there are a lot of, I mean, I will say my classes are pretty mixed. There are a lot of girls. Typically, the guys in the class try to run it. Okay. They try to outsmart the teacher or like answer all the questions, which if they know the question, great. But sometimes it's a little, I feel like some girls will be like, oh, I'm not going to answer any questions because they're taking over, like whatever, or they don't want to sound dumb. I don't know. So I feel like in that case, I was like, I didn't say anything, but then my friend said it, and then he was like, wait, you did? And I was like, yeah, I did actually, but I think it just caught him off guard and wasn't expecting it because he hadn't done it. And he thinks that what he does is he's like, his track is the best track, and that may be the case for him, but everyone is different. So it was definitely.
It was cool.
Yeah.
It was a good day.
Yeah.
I thought about that. I was
like, that was great.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Like,
high five. Go you. That was great. So talk about next steps logistically. What's the next step after you pass your SIE exam? And then just kind of moving forward, what your next steps are.
So Series 7. That's the next.
Series 7. Yay.
Yeah. So that's my next step. So basically I'm on winter break now. So I'm going to study for that. And whenever, again, I'm not going to like force myself to take it before I'm ready, but I do want to take it before classes start picking up in the spring, which I'll have a couple weeks, like when school starts, because it doesn't start picking up right away. But definitely want to get that done before I graduate and then move on to the next one.
That's another exam that's pass fail. So again, when you're looking to maybe break into finance, these are either items that you have on your resume or that you don't. And then when you get them on your resume, you're saving whatever company hires you after graduation. They don't have to invest the risk that maybe you pass, maybe you don't. They don't have to invest the cost of sponsoring you to take your exam and buy your materials and buy your books. And it's important to note, most colleges don't have you actually taking those exams, which blows my mind.
They should have those. They should have you be taking them.
100%. So for all of those reasons, number one, it makes you much more employable. And number two, negotiate. If you can take those exams, you are more valuable to whatever firm that you're going to end up at.
Right. If you get hired to a firm and you don't have all those, you can't give advice. You can't do anything yet. I mean, you can help and stuff, but you're not a full financial advisor yet because you don't have those licenses. You can't
talk to clients.
No, so then it takes, and if you have to take all of them post-grad, you have to think about the time to study, time to take, and if, say, you don't pass one of them, you have to wait in between before you can take it again, so it just elongates the time. So definitely Starting
early.
sooner is the best.
And by the way, it's worth saying we can't advise you on which exams you need to take. So it's different based on what your job is going to be. But those are just two of the kind of foundational exams when you're starting out and you're off to the races. But I remember when I was studying, I was working, and they would allow you to take it 2 times, and you were working full time, which is a little different than when you're in school, right? Because you especially in those kind of jobs, you're not working 40 hours, you're working way more than that. And whenever you have time to be at home, you're studying. And I remember you could fail it once, and then you had to pack up your desk, because if you failed it the second time, security wouldn't let you back in the building.
So Taylor's going to do that to me.
I would never, ever do it. We already passed. So there you go.
I have another one.
Oh my God, you're going to pass it. I don't worry. I remember I told you because you were so nervous.
I know.
And I'm an anxious test taker myself. So I was like, Haley, if you don't pass, it's fine.
I was like, she's just telling me that.
You're like, no, it's not true.
Jordan's like, I didn't. She's like, you're fine. I didn't pass it. I was like,
yes, a lot of people don't pass their first time. It's very normal. So if you don't pass, you can pass the next time. Just keep doing it. It's not the more expensive part is the books, and if you get like a Q Bank to re-register for the exam. Did you have to fill out something saying I sponsored you for the exam?
That's for the next one.
That's for the next one. Okay, because back in the day for the Series 7, when it was just one exam, you had to be sponsored by a firm.
Yeah, so that's the next one.
Okay,
yeah.
Got it. Well, great news. I'm going to sponsor you. And I think that there's one other part that I really wanted to mention. So, fun fact. Do you know what my major was in college?
It's not finance, and it wasn't econ. I think you minored in econ?
Yeah.
You did like...
It was called Visual Media Studies.
Yeah, I was going to say like public relations.
It was, yeah.
It was like something not
It was
not
something
math.
not financial, yeah. I was like, I partied a little too much to be an econ major. It's okay. It's okay. I got the minor. But the, I had
props. Econ's
tough.
That is tough.
Yeah. So I had kind of a unique major where I did a lot of startup internships, like internships at startups, and they called it a visual media studies major, whatever. I would argue in finance, psychology is a really useful major. Marketing for building a practice is a really important major. But I say that as an example because when I was coming out of college, I went to a great school. I didn't get an internship because of the school that I went to. Frankly, I got the internship I got because I was connected through my dad, who's a financial advisor.
Yeah.
And I never went to a career fair where they talked about financial advisors, smaller boutique wealth management firms. Nobody ever talked about that. And so I was like, I'm going to go be an entry-level business development person like all my friends. And then I saw how much internals at finance mutual fund companies made. And I was like, oh, so it's double. So I'm going to go ahead and try that. And when I did my interview, I barely knew what a mutual fund was. And they said, you got some of the highest marks we've ever had just because you were personable. We need you on the phone. We train you in a lot of these other skills. And I got to thinking to myself, the things that got me hired here, number one, getting my foot in the door was just knowing somebody because I had never really even heard about this industry. And number two, the reasons why I got hired weren't because I knew what standard deviation was, because frankly, I didn't really know it in the terms of mutual funds. So I always like to spread the word about the different pieces of our industry. And I commend you because a lot of younger wealth managers get into it just because they have a parent who's a financial advisor. So it's a hard field to break into, but it pays great money, especially if you can work in the beginning. If you can work at like a mutual fund company or something like that, you can make great money. You can get your licenses. But I always try to remind people to kind of make sure that you're reaching out on LinkedIn, you're meeting with all these different people, because really when you graduate, you don't even know how many different jobs are out there.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you ended up at our office.
Me too.
So is there anything else, any advice you would give to a young woman that's maybe looking to go into finance?
I would say just don't be nervous. Don't be scared to go, because it is nerve-wracking. It is intimidating to go into a field that is historically been predominated by men. The men have ran the field for the longest time, so it's definitely scary, but women are on the up and up in finance, so there's always room to change that and just believe in yourself and that you can do it, I guess. that sounds cheesy, but like it is. It's true.
I love
like,
it.
Don't think that you're not smart enough is basically what it is.
Say it again.
Don't think you're not smart enough.
Good, because you are smart
Yes.
enough. What a pleasure to have you on the podcast, to have you in my life, to have you as a beacon of hope for the future of finance. And I just think you're going to do incredible things, and I think you're already doing them. So thank you for coming
you.
on. And I love having this episode as like a little time capsule. We'll have to have you back as you start once you graduate and how things are going. And
Once I'm actually a college graduate.
I know. It's sooner than you think.
I know.
So
Scary.
thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And thank you all for watching. And until next time, remember that your wealth suits you better when it's tailored. Hey, that was great. Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through MFP Financial Services LLC, a registered investment advisor and separate entity from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Haley Brown and her company are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or MFP Financial Services LLC.